When a new teacher walked into a classroom full of arrogant students, nobody respected him. He wore an old shirt, carried a cheap briefcase, and smiled like someone who didn't belong there. But when the school's biggest bullies tore his shirt right in front of the entire class, he didn't yell, he didn't fight back. He just looked at them and said 4 chilling words, "Are you done now?" Everyone laughed that day, but minutes later, the same bullies were standing in front of him, trembling and begging for forgiveness, because what happened next didn't just silence the entire class. It changed their lives forever. This isn't just a story about a teacher. It's about how real strength never needs to shout. Welcome to Brainfuel, where every story sparks emotion, every lesson ignites thought, and every video reminds you that character matters more than anything else. If you love stories that open your heart and fuel your mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell icon, and let's dive into today's powerful story. What kind of teacher shows up in a shirt like that? The words cut through the morning chatter of 10th grade section be like a blade. Every head turned toward the classroom door. Standing there, clutching a worn-out leather briefcase, was a new teacher, a man in his mid-30s, with kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses and a neatly ironed but obviously old shirt. His name was Mr. Arif. It was his first day at Hillside High School. The corridor outside still buzzed with morning noise, bells ringing, footsteps echoing. But inside that classroom, the laughter had already begun. Raza leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Bro, look at that shirt. My dad uses better rag for washing car." His 2 best friends, Denial and Shamir, burst out laughing. They were known across the school as the 3 Kings, not because of their grades or talent, but because no one dared to mess with them. Teachers feared them, students followed them, and their rich parents' donations to school kept them untouchable. And now, a new teacher had walked straight into their territory. Mr. Arif smiled politely, unaware of what was about to unfold. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Arif. I'll be your new science teacher this term." His voice was calm, soft, but confident. He placed his briefcase on the desk, picked up a piece of chalk, and started writing his name on the blackboard. But before he could finish, someone threw a crumpled paper ball. It hit the board and bounced off, leaving a white mark on his freshly written A. The class erupted in laughter. Mr. Arif paused for a moment, then turned around slowly. His eyes scanned the room. Instead of anger, he smiled gently and said, "I see your aim is good. I hope your grades are the same." A few students chuckled nervously, impressed by his calmness. But the 3 Kings weren't done. When Mr. Arif began calling names for roll call, Raza whispered loudly to Denial, "Watch this." As Mr. Arif read, "Raza Ahmed," Raza stood up dramatically and said, "Yes, sir. Present, sir. And may I say, that shirt of yours really brings out the teacher on a budget look." The class exploded again. Mr. Arif paused, straightened his glasses, and said quietly, "Thank you, Raza. I'll take that as a compliment." But the mockery only fueled the bullies. They loved attention, and the new teacher was giving them a stage. As the roll call continued, Shamir started mimicking Mr. Arif's every move. When the teacher adjusted his tie, Shamir exaggerated the motion, pretending to fix an imaginary one. When Mr. Arif wrote on the board, Shamir scribbled nonsense in the air. The classroom became a circus. Still, Mr. Arif didn't shout, didn't complain, didn't send anyone out. He simply kept teaching, his tone even, his hands steady. That only made the bullies angrier. They wanted to break him. When the bell rang for the next period, most teachers would have let the class go early. But Mr. Arif said softly, "Before you leave, I'd like to share a quick story." The students groaned, but curiosity kept them seated. He began, "When I was your age, I had a teacher who wore the same coat every single day." Some students laughed at him too. But one day, that teacher saved my life, literally. He saw me walking home in the rain, stopped his car, and gave me his coat to stay warm. Later that evening, he got pneumonia because of it. I never forgot that kindness. For a second, the room grew quiet. But then Raza leaned forward with a grin. "Nice story, sir. But this isn't a movie. No one here is giving you their coat." The laughter returned. Mr. Arif nodded, smiling faintly. You're right. This isn't a movie. This is your life. And how you behave today becomes part of your story tomorrow. There was something in his tone, soft but powerful, that unsettled even the most arrogant ones. Yet, Raza wasn't finished. As the students began to pack up, he walked casually toward the teacher's desk. Sir, let me help you fix that collar, he said mockingly. Before anyone could react, he grabbed Mr. Arif's shirt collar and tugged, ripping the fabric. A loud rip echoed in the silent room. Everyone froze. The pocket and part of the front seam tore open. The chalk piece in Mr. Arif's hand dropped to the floor and broke in half. Gasps filled the air. Even Denial and Shamir looked shocked. This time, it had gone too far. Raza stepped back, half smiling, half scared. It was just a joke, sir. Mr. Arif looked down at the torn shirt, touched the fabric gently, and then looked up. His face was calm, too calm. Are you done? He asked softly. No one answered. You could have heard a pin drop. He bent down, picked up the broken chalk, placed it neatly on the desk, and said, Good. Then let's continue. The students exchanged confused looks. He walked back to the board and began teaching as if nothing had happened, his voice steady, his handwriting perfect. But the tension in the room was unbearable. The boys' laughter had died completely. When the bell finally rang, everyone rushed out, but not the three kings. They sat frozen, staring at the torn shirt and the man wearing it without a trace of anger. As Mr. Arif erased the board, the last words he wrote, "Respect is a reflection of character," lingered faintly on the surface. He turned around, smiled, and said, "Tomorrow, I'll show you something you've never seen in a classroom before. Don't be late." And with that, he picked up his briefcase and walked out. No shouting, no punishment, no complaint to the principal, just quiet dignity. Outside, students whispered about what had happened. Some laughed nervously, some felt uneasy, but everyone agreed on one thing. There was something different about this new teacher, something they couldn't quite understand yet. Back in the empty classroom, Raza sat staring at the piece of torn fabric still lying on the floor. For the first time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt guilty. He kicked it under a desk, pretending not to care, but deep down he knew tomorrow wasn't going to be just another day. Because Mr. Arif wasn't just any teacher. He was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The next morning, Hillside High buzzed with whispers. Everyone was talking about the new teacher, the man whose shirt had been torn by Raza in front of the entire class, and who hadn't reacted at all. No one could figure him out. Some students said he was too weak to fight back. Others said he was too smart to stoop to their level. But one thing was certain. Every single student was curious about what would happen today. When Mr. Arif entered 10th grade Section B, the class went silent. Even the notorious three kings, Raza, Denial, and Shamir, sat unusually quiet. He walked in wearing the same torn shirt, the very same one. The pocket was still ripped, the seam still undone. He hadn't even tried to sew it back. A few students exchanged shocked glances. Others lowered their eyes in guilt. Mr. Arif placed his briefcase on the desk, opened it slowly, and took out a piece of chalk. "Good morning," he said softly, his tone calm, as if nothing unusual had ever happened. "Let's begin." No one replied. The silence in that room was heavier than ever before. He turned toward the board and began to write. Science is not just about formulas. It's about understanding life. Then he faced class and said, "Yesterday, I asked you all to be on time today because I wanted to show you something special." The students leaned in. He continued, "We're going to start with a challenge. Whoever solves this will earn something that can't be bought, respect." The word respect echoed in the room like a spark. He picked up the chalk again and began writing a long physics problem across the board. Equations, variables, laws, forces. It stretched from one end to the other. It looked impossible. Raza frowned. "Sir, what's this? We haven't even studied half of these formulas yet." Mr. Arif smiled faintly. "That's the point. This question isn't about knowledge, it's about attitude." He placed the chalk down. "Who wants to try?" No one raised a hand. For the first time, the three bullies looked nervous. After a long pause, Denial muttered, "Sir, this is way above our level. No one can solve this." Mr. Arif nodded. "You're right. None of you can yet, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Every genius in history began as a student who dared to make mistakes." Then, without waiting, he picked up the chalk again and started solving it himself. As he worked, the room transformed. His movements were graceful, his explanations clear, and his passion filled the air. Every line he wrote, every formula he broke down, it was like watching art unfold on the blackboard. He didn't just write equations. He told stories with them. "This," he said, pointing to a line, "is Newton's third law. But it's not just about physics. It's about life. Every action creates a reaction. If you give respect, you receive respect. If you spread hate, it returns to you." The students listened, completely silent now. Even Raz's smirk had faded. Mr. Arif kept solving, step by step, turning what looked impossible into something simple and beautiful. When he reached the end, he turned back to face them and asked softly, "Do you understand now?" No one answered, but the look on their faces said everything. Then he wrote one more line on the board. "National Science Award, 2019 winner, Arif Khan." A ripple of shock ran through the classroom. "Wait!" Sanaa, the class topper, blinked. "That's you, sir?" Mr. Arif smiled humbly. "Yes. Before coming here, I worked as a research assistant abroad. But I left that life because I wanted to teach here, in my country, in schools like this, where students are still discovering who they are." The class stared in disbelief. The same man they mocked, the one they humiliated yesterday, had once represented Pakistan in a national science competition. He continued softly, "Do you know why I wear old clothes? Because I don't teach to impress. I teach to inspire." He looked around the room, his gaze gentle but sharp. "I've seen students chase brands and likes, but forget to chase dreams. And I've seen bullies destroy confidence in others because they never built their own." The three kings lowered their heads. Mr. Arif walked slowly toward the front row, where Raza sat stiffly, avoiding his eyes. "You tore my shirt yesterday," he said quietly. Raza's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Mr. Arif raised a hand. "I'm not angry. I just want you to think about why you did it." The boy's lips trembled. He had no answer. Mr. Arif smiled sadly. "When you tear someone's dignity, you don't just hurt them, you weaken your own character." Then he turned to class. "If you ever want to be respected, first learn to respect. Not your teacher, not your parents, just people. That's where it begins." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in years, the loudest class in school sat completely quiet. No whispers, no laughter, no arrogance, just quiet shame and reflection. Mr. Arif walked back to his desk, placed his chalk neatly, and said, "Now, open your notebooks. Let's start today's lesson." But no one moved. Even the principal, who had come to observe the new teacher from the doorway, stood frozen. What he had just witnessed wasn't a science lesson. It was a lesson in humanity. As the bell rang, students left one by one, their heads low, but Raza stayed behind. He approached the desk slowly. "Sir," he began, his voice shaky, I'm sorry about yesterday. I didn't know who you were." Mr. Arif looked at him gently. "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Raza, you only need to know what's right." Tears welled up in Raza's eyes. He nodded, ashamed. Then Denial and Shamir walked over too. Denial whispered, "We were stupid. Sir, please forgive us." Mr. Arif smiled faintly. "Forgiveness is easy, but proving you've changed, that's what matters." They nodded silently, understanding. That afternoon, when the students left the classroom, none of them talked about grades, clothes, or jokes anymore. They talked about Mr. Arif and how a man with a torn shirt had managed to make them feel smaller than ever without raising his voice once. And for the first time, Raza realized something powerful. Respect wasn't demanded. It was earned. As the sun set outside the dusty classroom windows, Mr. Arif stood alone, erasing the chalkboard slowly. The torn pocket on his shirt flapped slightly in the breeze from the open window. He smiled quietly to himself and whispered, "Lesson 1 complete." The next morning at Hillside High, something had changed. The 10th graders, once the loudest, most arrogant class in school, sat quietly at their desks, waiting for Mr. Arif to arrive. The same students who once threw paper balls and cracked jokes now looked uneasy, fidgeting in silence. When the door finally opened and Mr. Arif stepped in, everyone stood up. "Good morning, sir," they said in unison. It wasn't forced. It wasn't out of fear. It was out of respect. Mr. Arif smiled faintly, nodding. "Good morning, everyone. Please sit." He wore another simple shirt that day, still old, still modest, but this time it looked different in their eyes. It no longer symbolized weakness. It represented strength. He began the class as usual, but the students could barely focus on the lesson. They were waiting for a moment to make things right. Finally, halfway through the period, Raza stood up. His voice trembled slightly. "Sir, may I say something?" Mr. Arif paused, placing the chalk on the desk. "Go ahead." Raza took a deep breath. "Sir, about what happened 2 days ago. I'm really sorry. I disrespected you. I thought your clothes made you less than us. But you," he swallowed hard, "you showed us what real strength looks like." The room was silent. Every eye was on Raza. Denial stood up next. "Sir, we were wrong too. We thought being loud meant being powerful. But when you didn't react, it made us realize how small we actually were." And then, to everyone's surprise, Shamir, usually the toughest of the three, stood up as well. His voice broke slightly. "Sir, I laughed when they tore your shirt. I thought it was funny. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, if someone had done that to my father, how would I feel?" The class fell silent. Some students looked down. Others wiped their eyes. Mr. Arif didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly, he stood up and looked at all three of them. "I forgive you," he said softly. "Not because you apologized, but because you understood." The boys blinked, surprised. He continued, "We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we choose to repeat them or learn from them." His words hit them deeper than any punishment ever could. Then he walked toward the chalkboard and wrote one line in big letters. "Greatness begins the moment ego ends. Remember this," he said, turning around. "Knowledge can make you smart. But humility, that's what makes you great." The rest of that week, something remarkable happened. The class that used to be known for chaos turned into the most disciplined one in the school. Students started greeting every teacher respectfully. They helped clean the classroom, kept their phones away during lectures, and even started asking thoughtful questions. But the biggest change was in the three kings themselves. Raz began tutoring a few of the weaker students after class. Denial started volunteering in the library, helping organize books. And Shamir joined the school's debate team, using his loud voice to speak about things that mattered. The entire school began noticing the transformation. Teachers whispered, "What did that new science teacher do? How did he change them like that?" The answer was simple. He didn't punish them. He inspired them. A few months later, the school held its annual function. Parents, teachers, and students filled the large auditorium. There were speeches, awards, and performances, but everyone was waiting for one announcement: Teacher of the Year. When the principal stepped up to the podium, he smiled proudly. "This year's award goes to a teacher who has not only taught science, but has taught our children the meaning of respect, humility, and character. Please welcome Mr. Arif Khan." Thunderous applause filled the hall. Students stood on their feet, cheering. Mr. Arif walked onto the stage, visibly humble, adjusting his glasses as the spotlight hit him. The principal handed him the golden plaque, engraved with his name. But before he could speak, a voice called out from the crowd, "Sir, wait!" It was Raza. He was walking toward the stage, holding a box wrapped in blue paper. Behind him came Denial and Shamir, carrying something carefully between them. They climbed the stairs, their hands trembling slightly. Raza faced the microphone. "Sir, this isn't part of the program, but we want to do something for you." He opened the box. Inside was a new white shirt, neatly folded, pressed, and tied with a ribbon. Denial spoke next. "Sir, we know we can't erase what we did, but we wanted to replace that torn shirt with one that represents the respect we feel for you now." Shamir added quietly, "This isn't a gift. It's an apology and a promise that we'll never forget the lesson you taught us." The hall went silent. Even the principal's eyes glistened. Teachers exchanged emotional glances. Mr. Arif took the shirt in his hands, his voice soft but steady. "Thank you, boys, but you've already given me something far greater than this." He looked out over the crowd. "You gave me hope that even those who make mistakes can change if they choose to." He turned back to the microphone. "This shirt," he said, lifting it slightly, "means more to me than any award, any title, any achievement, because it reminds me that kindness can rebuild what cruelty once broke." The audience erupted in applause. Students cheered, parents wiped away tears, and for the first time, even the three kings smiled. Genuine smiles, not the fake ones they used to wear. From that day on, no one at Hillside High ever dared to mock a teacher's clothes again. The story of the teacher with the torn shirt became legendary. It was told to every new student as a reminder that respect is not about appearances. It's about heart. Years later, when Raza, Denial, and Shamir graduated, they visited Mr. Arif one last time. He was sitting in the same classroom, teaching a new batch of students, still wearing his simple clothes and that same warm smile. They walked in quietly, holding their graduation caps. Raza said, "Sir, we just want to say thank you for never giving up on us." Mr. Arif smiled, eyes kind as ever. "You didn't need me to forgive you," he said softly. "You needed to forgive yourselves." As they left the room, Mr. Arif looked out the window at the playground filled with laughter and thought to himself, if only every teacher could see the power in patience, and every student could see the beauty and respect, this world would already be better. And as the school bell rang once more, echoing to the hallways, the story of one torn shirt continued to teach lessons that no textbook ever could. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons in life aren't written in chalk. They're written in the heart.